Travelogue, West Virginia, 1939. Traveling through the beautiful Taggart Valley, we come upon an example of Eleanor Roosevelt's hope for a civil society. The beautifully built Cape Cod-style houses are complete with hot and cold running water, an indoor bathroom, all situated on between 1.5 and 2 acres of land. To achieve the goals of self-sufficiency, the United States government has poured over $675,000 on the West Virginia project alone. The Taggart Valley Homestead is the newest and largest of the West Virginia homesteads. The Taggart Valley Homestead School, recently completed, is the crown jewel of the Taggart Valley homesteads. Housing 9 grades, children are taught academic subjects often through a combination of lecture, reading, and experience. One example is by teaching students the world and other cultures, for example, through the Maypole dance.
I came at the end of first grade, and I don't know whether my first day was May Day or not. I know we came here in May. And of course, on May Day, they had a big whole school celebration in the gym, and they had the, I guess maybe volleyball post, and they had ribbons down. And the whole class had already practiced, and they did it by couples. A girl was with a boy, and they knew, they were winding in and out and doing the Maypole dance.
In May, we had the Maypole dance, and I forget what grade it was in. I think it was the 5th grade or something. The girls did the Maypole dance, and you dressed up, you bought a real nice fancy dress and had your hair all fixed. And they had this big pole in the gym, and they had strings up there, and you went in and out and in and out and raveled that around that pole. It was called the Maypole dance, and it was done in May every year.
May Day. Have you heard of the May Day pole we had here? It was wonderful.
In 1933, Eleanor Roosevelt traveled to a place that became the national example of a disintegrating society. This visit would lead to some of the most important legislative changes in the history of the United States. Scotts Run, West Virginia was once known as the most valuable mineral deposit in the world, and eventually became known nationally as the poster child of the Great Depression. The once thriving coal mining area, Scotts Run, West Virginia, fell victim to the Great Depression, leaving thousands of families living in deplorable conditions. Unemployed miners were stranded in the mountains with no money to leave and barely enough to survive. Reporter Lorna Hickok stated, "Scotts Run, a coal mining community not far from Morgantown, was the worst place I'd ever seen. In a gutter along the main street through the town, there was stagnant, filthy water, which the inhabitants used for drinking, cooking, washing, and everything else imaginable. On the other side of the street were ramshackle houses, black with coal dust, which most Americans would not have considered fit for pigs. And in those houses, every night, children went to sleep hungry on piles of bug-infested rags spread out on the floor. There were rats in those houses." As I proceeded through the state, I found other places just as bad. Everywhere grimy, undernourished, desperate people, so hungry that they could not wait for the vegetables to mature in the pathetic little gardens they tried to raise on mountainsides so steep that they must have had to shoot the seeds into them to make them stick. They would dig up the tiny potatoes long before they had reached their full size, and pick the tomatoes and eat them while they were still green. By April 1933, 63% of the town's population was unemployed. Many families lived in small shacks with little to eat and no running water. Several families would share an outdoor toilet. These living conditions made people vulnerable to disease. Children might go to school if they were healthy enough and not working to help out their families. Roosevelt's chief project during her husband's first 2 terms was the establishment of planned communities in West Virginia. In 1933, at her friend Lorna Hickok's urging, Eleanor Roosevelt visited the families of homeless miners in Morgantown, West Virginia, at Scott's Run, who had been blacklisted following Union activities. Deeply affected by the visit, Roosevelt proposed a resettlement community for the miners at Arthurdale, where they could make a living by subsistence farming, handicrafts, and a local manufacturing plant. She hoped the project could become a model for a new kind of community in the United States in which workers would be better cared for. Her husband enthusiastically supported the project. Soon, President Roosevelt's administration established a subsistence homestead division as part of the New Deal. The New Deal was a collection of public projects and programs that President Roosevelt created during the Great Depression. They were based on ideas related to progressivism and social reform. These projects and programs gave government agencies power to help the country during the national economic crisis. This power was used to create new jobs, to employ people, regulate the stock market, and provide Social Security for Americans. The President and his supporters, including Eleanor, believed the New Deal would help Americans everywhere. Roosevelt followed progressive ideologies that believed society's various problems could be solved by providing good education, secure sources of food, a safe environment, and an efficient workplace. He increased federal government spending and created New Deal programs like the Civilian Conservation Corps and the Works Progress Administration, which used federal money to temporarily employ thousands of people through public works projects. Projects like the Subsistence Homesteads Division developed 3 homestead planned communities in West Virginia at Arthurdale, Eleanor, and the Taggarts Valley. So on a particular day in 1934, children from 165 lucky families began moving from a life of drudgery to their new homes in Arthurdale. Eleanor Roosevelt shared with presidential advisor Harry Hopkins an abiding faith in the unemployed, a belief that they were decent, honest people suffering through no fault of their own, totally deserving of government help. Mrs. Roosevelt and Harry Hopkins kept their minds a vivid picture of the lives of these people, and that image drove them to push the government to create as many jobs for as many people as possible. The Taggart Valley Homesteads was a project of the Federal Subsistence Homesteads Corporation, created by the Roosevelt administration during the Great Depression. The idea was to provide a new start for unemployed farmers, miners, and timber workers. This was one of 3 resettlement projects in West Virginia, the others being at Arthurdale and Eleanor. The first houses were ready for occupancy on February 11, 1935, and by the end of 1936, 158 houses sheltered 750 people. And so, on a day in 1936, children from 158 families left behind a dismal future for a bright new future in the Taggarts Valley Homestead.
There's a new day in view, there's gold in the blue, there is hope in the hearts of men. All the world's on the way to a sunnier day, for the road is open again. There's a note of repair, there's a song in the air, it's the music of busy men. Every plow in the land meets a happier hand, 'cause the road is open again. There's an eagle blue in the White House too, on the shoulder of our president there, with a lusty call telling one and all, brother, do your share. There's a new day in view, there is gold in in the blue. There is hope in the hearts of men. From the plain to the hill, from the farm to the mill, all the road is open again.
Eleanor Roosevelt's hope of saving democracy and creating a civil society can be seen and heard through the words of children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren of the Taggart Valley homesteaders.
There were 1,640 of them
They
applied for the
sent a
homes.
government around to the homes, I know that. 'Cause I can remember a man and a woman coming to our home in what they call Cameltown. That's where I lived before I moved here. You know where, over on this side of Arlington, you know where Edry is?
I do?
Well, it's between Edry and Riverside.
All
And
right.
then Arlington. Now that's where they sent a man and a woman in over there to check people out. Well, they went all over the state.
Oh, okay.
These
What-
counties, these people here, my list shows them being born in different counties. Lewis, Harrison, Pendleton, Upshur.
I guess it was pretty well statewide as to when they advertised that there would be,
And
and then
it
you
was
had
so-
to apply, and then they checked
Checked
your history and also your vocation, you know. That my thought was they picked people, a good complement of people that could work at the mill, you know, and do different things and support the community. And
Not when they selected them. They were selecting the ones that weren't working.
yeah, and they weren't
So they weren't working, but they
No,
had trades.
yeah.
Now my dad was working for I don't know if it was welfare, I never did find out. But he was working at Watauga State Park.
Watauga State Park, largest in the state, located in picturesque Pocahontas County, is approached from one end by a ford and an old ferry, which are as familiar to some West Virginians as the Crossroads store.
My mom's sister, Ethel, she married Cecil Rosencrantz, and my mom married John Rosencrantz. They were cousins. So I was related on both sides. Cecil and my Aunt Ethel were original homesteaders at Daly, and Uncle Cecil built or helped build many of the homes. He never even owned a car, so he just walked to work every day.
Was community. I mean, everybody was the same socioeconomic background. Everybody had the same goals in life. A lot of your time was spent surviving. And in the summertime, you raised your gardens and you canned the vegetables, and then lots of times in the fall, they also buried turnips and some of your produce from your garden. You buried it and covered it and then put it in straw, and then you dug it out later. It was gave you another storage area and a way of preserving things.
Oh yes, my dad especially, you know, he was very into history. So he always, I mean, he took me all over the state of West Virginia to different places. That's why I was able to get that golden horseshoe thing in the 8th grade. Yeah. But yeah, he used to tell me, oh, you know, Eleanor Roosevelt, this was her project, and there's another one like this, it's over at Arthurdale, and you know, things like that. He was always telling me.
Mama grew up in Nicholas County, and I'm not sure how, because they weren't part of the original homestead, but they must have heard about it, and Granddaddy was retiring from being a coal miner, and so they bought their place there in Valley Bend. And we went through 9th grade here, so we went to Tigers Valley High School as sophomores.
Oh, yeah, so you weren't coming in.
And we had Miss Hofer for algebra. We already had Algebra 1 here. I think we felt superior.
Yeah.
We were a close-knit, we had gone here, you know, and we had a large-size class, and we had bonded, and so we went up there, and we remained bonded, but we met other people up there too. But this was such a special place.
Having humble beginnings as participants in the resettlement movement, the Taggarts Valley homesteaders were sometimes equated by those opposed to the movement as being on the dole or receiving relief. However, all of the original Taggarts Valley homesteaders paid off what they owed on their homes, which is an accolade that they alone have earned. Out of 100 homesteads in the United States, the Taggarts Valley homesteaders paid their dues and were able to maintain the last surviving homestead school in America until 2016, when the roof was destroyed during a violent storm. The local Board of Education had identified the school as one that they could not continue to maintain, and it was sold to the Taggarts Valley Homestead Association. The association is a group that is desperately trying to maintain the original purpose of the building as a place to foster education, civility, and democracy by restoring it to its original luster and using it as a community center for all in the valley to enjoy.
Discouragement, fear, failure. Only a few years ago, these stalked the nation. Depression haunted America. We groped, we struggled, we found the way to better times. Today, depression is a fading memory. Millions of men and women have found employment, and with it, confidence and hope. The Great Works program has removed a vast army from relief roles. It revived lagging industry, restored morale, and renewed courage. In a program which covers the entire nation, West Virginia takes an important place. A project employing thousands of workers is the improvement of almost 3,500 miles of secondary and of so-called creek and hollow roads, which follow the natural contours of the land. Roads once impassable in bad weather are now good the year round, allowing the people of formerly inaccessible mountain communities to get to market centers and giving tourists, hunters, and fishermen access to the beautiful streams and forests of the Alleghenies. In projects such as this and in the great construction program throughout the state, we find assurance that we are building a strong foundation for a better West Virginia.